Hello guys, you're welcome to another tutorial on Sew with Abby channel. In today's video, I'll be sharing how to cut and sew this shirt dress with gathered hem. This tutorial is well detailed and beginners friendly. So if this is what you like to see, then keep watching. Let's get into the video. For this tutorial, I'll be working with an African print fabric, but you can make use of any fabric of your choice, and the amount is 3 yards. But that 3 yards totally depends on your body size. Now I've folded my fabric into 4 as I'll be cutting the back and front piece together, and the amount I folded is 16 inches, which is my hip circumference divided by 4 plus extra 6 inches. Now this is the back piece, it is on fold, and this is the front piece. I added extra 2 inches to the front piece, and that 2 inches will serve as the button allowance since we are working on a shirt dress. From the top of my fabric, I'll come down by 1 inch, and I'll measure the 1 inch all through. Then connect the point into a straight line. Now this straight line will serve as the starting or the shoulder line, and from there I'll take my vertical measurements. The first is my waistline, which is 15.5 inches, and from that mark I'll come down by 10 inches for my hip line. Then I'll draw straight lines across. Now for the length of this dress, my desired length is 36 inches, and because this dress is in 2 parts, that is from the shoulder to before the gathers, which is the upper part, and from the gathers to the full length, which is the lower part, I made the upper part, that's the part I'm working on, 28 inches plus 1 inch sewing allowance, and the gathered part will be 8 inches. That was how I got my full length. So go ahead and determine how long or short you want your dress to be. The next thing to do is to take the neck measurement. From the center fold of the back piece, I'll measure 3 inches as the neck width and 1 inch for the back neck depth. For the front neck depth, I'll come down by 2.5 inches. Next, I'll take my shoulder measurement. My shoulder measurement divided by 2 plus ½ inch sewing allowance. And from that mark, I'll come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope. Then draw a slant line back to the neck area. From the shoulder slope, I'll measure my armhole depth. To get your armhole depth, you divide your bust circumference by 6, then you add 1.5 inches to whatever you get. Now I want to create my armhole curve. To do that, I'll first measure my bust circumference divided by 4, then come to the armhole line to get the midpoint of the line. And from that point, I'll go in by ½ inch. Then I'll connect the points together. And here we have our armhole curve. Now this armhole is the front armhole. For the back armhole, we need not go in by ½ inch. We just connect from this point to the midpoint on the armhole line, like so. Alright guys, the next thing to do is to take my round measurements, and I already measured my bust circumference. I'll just add extra inches as allowance. Because I want this dress to be free on my body, I'll be adding 1.5 inches as ease allowance and 1 inch as sewing allowance, making the total allowance 2.5 inches. Now your ease allowance depends on how free you want the dress to be on your body. Then on my waistline, I'll divide my waist circumference by 4 plus the 2.5 inches allowance. I will also divide my hip circumference and add the extra inches. Now the total measurement I have on my hip line is 12.5 inches, and I can decide to use the same measurement at the hem or simply add extra inches to give an A-line shape, and that is what I'll be doing. So the measurement at the hem now is 14.5 inches. That's 2 inches addition to what is at the hip line. And guys, this is all for the drafting of this dress. I'll go ahead now to cut, and when cutting, I'll add extra ½ inch sewing allowance to the shoulder, and I'll be cutting the back armhole and the back neckline before I cut the front armhole and the front neckline. And before I cut the front neckline and armhole, I'll come to this side of the hem and come up by about 0.75 to shape it a little. Then I will draw a straight line indicating the button allowance on the front piece. I will separate the back piece and also cut out the front neckline. An ½ inch before the line, I'll notch the button allowance. Then I will return the back piece on the front piece to check if the front neckline is properly cut using my tracing wheel. For the front armhole, I'll remark it, then cut it out. Now that we are done cutting, the next thing to do is to start stitching. But before then, I will also notch the button allowance at the hem ½ inch before the line. So guys, this is what you should have for your front piece. This is what it should look like. The first part I'll be stitching is the button allowance. I will fold about 0.75 in. I'll fold that twice. Then I'll run a stitch on it, and I'll do the same to the second piece. And this is what I have after stitching the button allowance. The next thing to do is to join the shoulder of the back and front pieces together. I'll place each piece of the front on the back piece, right side facing each other, and I'll be stitching using ½ inch measurement. After joining the shoulder, the next thing to do is to close the two sides, and I'll be using the allowance I left for it while cutting. I have closed the side, and now I want to cut out collar for the neckline. I'll measure round the neckline to know what length to cut out for the collar. I have 18.5 inches here. Now this is the piece for my collar, and I already ironed interfacing to it. I'll fold it into 4 and proceed to draft out the collar. What I measured round the neckline was 18.5 inches, so I'll divide that into 2 and mark it. Then I'll draw out my starting line. I was supposed to do that first. From the starting line, I'll go up by 1 inch and mark the same thing at the center fold. Then I'll connect the points. I will also connect this point. Now from the edge of the line, I'll go in by 1 inch. And from that mark, I'll go up by 2.5 inches. And from this point, I'll go out by 0.5 inch. If you don't understand what I'm saying, just watch me, okay? Then at the center fold, instead of marking 2.5 inches like I marked there, I'll mark 2 inches. And when you connect the point, you are going to have a slant line. And at this side of the collar, I'll make a little curve. And this is all for the drafting. When cutting, I'll add extra inch as sewing allowance. And this is what the collar looks like. I will head over to the sewing machine to stitch using the sewing allowance. After stitching, I notched the corners and the edges before I turned it right out, and I gave it a good press. I also fold in the hem of this collar with ½ inch. The next thing to do is to attach it to the neckline of my dress, but first I'll notch the center. And I will also notch the center back of the neckline. Then I'll attach it together, making sure the notched part aligns. I'll pin the collar around the neckline. And this is what your collar will look like after stitching. I will head over to stitch using 1/2 inch measurement. And after stitching this side of the collar, I will tuck in the seam like so. And use this other side of the collar to cover it up, then top stitch on it. This is what the collar looks like after stitching. I also top stitch round it. So guys, the next thing to do is to work on the down part. I want to cut out the piece for the gathers, but first I'll measure around the hem to know what I have there. And whatever I measure here, I'll cut out ×2 for my gathers. Here I have 55 inches, which means I'm cutting 55 inches ×2, that's about 110. This is the piece for the gathers, and this is a very long piece which I folded into 4, and each fold is 28 inches. 28 inches multiplied by 4 is 102 inches, and the length is 9 inches. The original length I need is 8. I added 1 inch sewing allowance. 1/2 inch will be used to join the upper part, and the remaining 1/2 inch will be used to fold the hem. I will notch the center fold and also notch the side fold, because it is important to notch your fabric when you are trying to make gathers. Then I'll go over to my sewing machine to run loose stitch at the top of my fabric for the gathers. And if you don't want to gather your fabric, you can as well pleat it. After creating the stitch, I'll pick a thread and start to pull on it for the gathers. And I'll do this to the end of the fabric. At this point, I was done making the gathers, and I gathered it to the measurements I have at the hem of the upper part. And while making the gathers, I placed pins at the notched part so that it will be easier for me to locate when I want to stitch. I already notched the center of my dress, so I'll flip it over so that the right side will face up. Then I'll pin the center of the gathers to the center of my dress, and also pin this side. At the front opening, I will leave out 1 inch and wrap it round the hem. I'll do the same to the other side and go over to stitch. After stitching, this is what I have. I went ahead to use hemming gum to hold down the rough edge of the gathers, and I also fold in the hem and run a stitch all round. So guys, the next thing to do is to cut out sleeves for the armhole. I already folded my fabric into 4, as I'll be cutting the 2 sleeves together, and my desired sleeve length is 26 inches. Now from that 26 inches, I'll take out 4 inches for band, and what will be left is 22 inches, and that is what I have here, plus 1 inch sewing allowance. And when I attach the 4 inches band, it will add up to my desired length. Now from the top of my fabric, I'll come down by 4.5 inches, then draw a slant line back to the fold of the sleeve. And on that slant line, I'll get the midpoint. Then I will extend the point a little below and a little above the slant line to create a curve. And on that curve, I'll mark my round armhole divided by 2. Go ahead and measure around your armhole and divide what you have into 2. Mine is 9.5 inches, and I added 1/2 inch sewing allowance. At the hem of the sleeve, I'll mark my round wrist measurement divided by 2 plus extra 2.5 inches. Then I'll connect the points together. So this is all for the drafting. I'll go ahead to cut on the lines. I will notch the fold at the top here, reshape the side, and also notch the fold at the base. I have cut out my band, and the length is 4.5 inches. 4 inches is the actual length plus 1/2 inch sewing allowance, and the width is 11 inches, although I later reduced it to 9 inches. So I'll notch the center. And this is how I will attach it to the sleeve. I'll pin the notched parts together, then make little pleats to fit the band. I will stitch using 1/2 inch measurement, and this is what it will look like after stitching. So guys, after attaching the band to the sleeve, I went ahead to close the side, and this is what it looks like. The next thing to do is to attach the sleeve to the armhole of my dress, and this is how I will stitch it together. I'll go ahead now to stitch, and I'll stitch the second sleeve the same way. And this is what the sleeve looks like after attaching it to the armhole. The last thing to do here is to create buttonholes and tag the button. The buttonholes will be on the left side, while the button will be on the right side. So I created the buttonholes and tagged the button, and I also made a belt, which is totally optional. And with that, we've come to the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching, guys. Kindly give this video a thumbs up if you find it helpful, and subscribe to my channel if you are yet to. And I'll see you in my next one.